Welcome to UMass, to the medical school, and to the UMass Memorial Healthcare System. It's really a pleasure and an honor to have so many people from the community coming for such an important topic. My name is Doug Sedonis. I'm chair of the Department of Psychiatry here, and it's really my honor to kick off this important event. I have a lot of thank yous to say, but most especially to all of you who've come today. We've started to do more activities with the community, with different type of educational events, which we want to actually increase our numbers over the next year. So we're looking forward to your input. If you see me walking around at any of the breaks, please let me know if there are any topics that you're interested in. Also, we're going to have an email list that we would send out. And so if we have permission to get your email, then we'll keep you on the list of other activities that we have. But today's event is sponsored and led by Narsad. We're very grateful to them for their research support for many of our faculty and staff. They and other funding agencies play such a vital role in fighting stigma and in helping us to better understand the underlying causes, as well as the treatments and potential cures for mental illness. The Department of Psychiatry here at UMass has a very long-standing history as a public sector. The Department of Psychiatry, we're all on the grounds of the Worcester State Hospital, and the new state hospital building is going up. Our first residency program started in the 1850s, training young doctors to become psychiatrists and specialize in this area. And the medical school was built in the 60s and 70s here, and has always had a very strong support for psychiatry. And in addition to being an excellent primary care medical school and a top-notch research institution that continues to grow each year in that area. I want to thank UMass Memorial for all of its support with our great clinical system here, where we do have a number of psychiatry clinical services that are very important, we think, to the community. Marie Hobart, where's Marie? Marie is the medical director for our Community Health Link, which is a very large system. She's also one of our leaders of our wellness initiative. We feel like every day we fight stigma. And to know that people in the Department of Mental Health have a lifespan 25 years shorter than everyone else in the state of Massachusetts really has to be sung out louder, and we really need to understand that problem and address it in a much better way, including leading new wellness initiatives. And that's why our department has taken that on, including partnering with SAMHSA to say that in the next 10 years, we want to increase lifespan for our patients by 10 years. That's also another major initiative that the Department of Mental Health here in the state, and we're lucky to have such a terrific partnership. Mary Ellen Fody, we're going to hear from a few opening remarks, but the commissioner wasn't able to make it here today, but they've been so strongly supportive of all our efforts here and training and clinical and research, and we're so thankful for their support. The dean and the medical school, Terry Flood, and the chancellor, Michael Collins, weren't able to make it today. They had other activities going on, but we will hear from the school that's been also extremely supportive of all of our efforts. In addition to the Department of Mental Health, another strong partnership that we have is the Veterans Affairs. It's so important in this era as we're here enjoying an important day and activity, but to think of all the soldiers fighting over today as we're speaking and giving their lives for our country. And so we have a very strong connection with the VA as the soldiers return home, many of them with trauma, PTSD and depression and alcoholism on top of the physical illnesses that they're coming back with. So David Smelson from the VA network is going to be here also to say a word from the VA. We're blessed to have National Alliance of the Mentally Ill and PAL here represented. They do such great work in the community and around the nation. Their ongoing commitment and passion is probably why many of you are here today, and we're so glad that they're being represented here today. We also hope that you, when you have the break, go out and see some of the tables where you can see a little bit about our department activities. We have a website, umassmed.edu/psychiatry. There's a booth that will describe it, and then you could see all the activities that we do have there. We have grand rounds that you could walk in on at any time. We have people from the community every Thursday morning come from 9 to 10:30, and it's a great activity. We have lecturers from all over the world that come. We have a large department of psychiatry, one of the largest in the country. We have over 300 faculty and over 2,000 staff. It's a large group that's working all throughout central Massachusetts. In our research area in the last 2 years, we've doubled our NIH funding, which in this time of reduced federal funds, it's only really due to the hardworking faculty and the staff that support them, and also the leadership and administration that we have here at this school, including our first welcoming remarks that I'll mention in a minute. We have a mental health agency research network that we partner with the Department of Mental Health that allows us to link out with lots of agencies to provide ongoing education of the different work that we do, different research that we do, different training opportunities, and also new cutting-edge research. Dr. Sullivan was the leader for our school in the Clinical and Translational Science Award application, and a lot of that research work is getting out into the community, listening to the community. What are the important questions that we as researchers should be looking at? And this kind of meeting today also is a time to hear your questions when we have the break, to really understand what are the critical questions. So again, I just want to thank you all for coming. We're going to have time to hear some incredible research findings from 3 of our top faculty members who are going to be presenting some outstanding work. But there will be also time for questions and answers, and we really want to hear from you too. So I'd like to introduce our first welcoming remarks by Dr. John Sullivan. Why not? Why not? He's a physician and a research scientist. He's the vice provost of research for the Office of Research here at the medical school. He is a professor of pediatrics and molecular medicine. As a pediatric immunologist, virologist with a 25-year track record of outstanding NIH-funded research. In 1999, since then he has directed the Office of Research, which is responsible for the oversight of $160 million of research here at the school. He has many important roles within that role. He's one of the leaders in the world on understanding HIV and the impact on kids. Some of his work has really revolutionized the way we look at HIV and how what before was a death sentence has now turned into a chronic condition, and we're hoping to continue to improve that. And many of our patients are at risk for HIV, for hepatitis C, and other serious immune illnesses. Dr. Sullivan was honored with the Governor's Award for Excellence in Public Service. So not only is he a strong scientist, but he's very committed to the public service work that we want to represent here at the school. Dr. Sullivan.
So welcome to your medical school. I've been here 32 years, and this is the most exciting time for this medical school. This is the life sciences moment. I want to point out up here the Rudnick Neuropsychiatric Research Institute opened in 2000. In June of 2000, the NIH and Human Genome Sciences announced the haploid genome of the human had been sequenced. That was in 2000. Genome Project completed. We know what those 3 billion base pairs are. We're now at the 10th year anniversary. What impact has that had on human diseases such as those that we're interested in today? And it really hasn't had very much of an impact till now. But what we've learned over those 10 years, and it's taken us 10 years, there are only 24 individual genomes that have been published. There are approximately 200 that have actually been sequenced. What we've learned is that we have about 25,000 genes. A worm has 21,000. And we know that the complexity between a worm and a human has got to be explained by the rest of that genome that doesn't encode genes. And it turns out that most of that is related to another nucleic acid called RNA. As Doug mentioned, the National Institutes of Health, in order to really speed up the translation of this genome project into something that has a huge impact on human disease and new therapies, has started a series of awards. There'll be 60 institutions around the country that will be focused on clinical and translational research. 60. I'm happy to say that on July 1, UMass will be one of those 60. And one of the prime reasons that we will be is because we have invested in the Sherman Center, the RNA Institute that will open up in 2012. Some of you, when you go outside this building, you'll see a fence going up. That's where that building is going to be built. A 500,000 square foot research facility that will include the RNA Institute. Now, the importance of this is that we need to sequence tens of thousands of individuals, because that is, in fact, how we're going to figure out how the molecular and cellular events that connect genes to behavior. And so it's going to take the sequencing of 1,000 patients or more with schizophrenia before we can understand all the complex interactions that relate these genes to behavior. And the important part of this is that we're going to understand the disease and we're going to be able to develop new therapies. And I've named the new hospital the Commonwealth Psychiatric Hospital. That's the hospital that's coming up on top of the hill. You see the steel growing up there. And why I called it the Commonwealth Hospital was because I think if we do our job right, that hospital should be able to take care of all the patients in the Commonwealth, because patients aren't going to have to be in the hospital, because we're going to be able to understand the disease, and Tony's going to be able to use new therapies to impact and prevent patients from going into the hospital. This is the life sciences moment. And when you all come back here in 10 years, we're going to have some great news to tell you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sully. Sully's been such a great support for all the research and work we do, and I appreciate your coming out today to help us kick this off. Next, I'd like to introduce, we really were fortunate last time we did the Narsad event, we didn't actually have someone from Narsad other than a video. And the video was great, and we're going to see one this year. But this year, we really are, it's a privilege to introduce one of Narsad's board members, Mr. George Handren. George is local to Massachusetts and has graduated from Villanova and Suffolk Law School in Boston. He practiced law in Boston since 1981, continues to have a private practice there. In addition to being on the Narsad Board of Directors, he also is a trustee of the Sidney Bear Foundation. George and I have had the chance to speak, and I know his passion for this important topic. He and I share a common interest also in the clubhouse phenomena, which is so important for availability in our community, serves such an important role. We have a number of faculty interested in not only working within the clubhouses, but also doing research in that area. Personally, I've been involved with Colleen McKay and getting funding from the Legacy Foundation on the issue of smoking and tobacco addiction that plagues our community with mental health, and one is the key factors of why people have such shorter lifespans, the smoking and the obesity, and that's why we have the wellness initiative in that area. So George, you've been tireless, a pioneer and pusher of making sure there's good funding for research, and we're so grateful that you're able to come. Please come up and help welcome this event.
It's always difficult because I never know which hat I'm wearing. It's fairly tricky because my hats are all intertwined. In 2002, I was flying home from California, and I had just gotten the news before I got on the plane that Sidney Bear had died. He had been a client of mine. He had suffered from schizophrenia. I'd worked for him for 22 years. A lot of people already know that and have dealt with Sidney. And no, I am not Sidney Bear. There are people who think so. And I was flying home saying, okay, now I'm a trustee on a foundation for mental illness. He and I had talked about how to spend the money, what would we fund, and he felt strongly about research, but he said, if you give any money to any drug company, I'll come back and haunt you. So I haven't funded any drug companies. In any event, I got back to Boston to change clothes and go back out to St. Louis to bury him, and I made a couple of phone calls. And 3 people said to me, my question was, now what am I going to do? I have to fund research. How do I find who to fund, where to fund, who? I don't have enough money to create an advisory council. I don't have 100 doctors I can ask and pay to see who I should fund. It's a fascinating field, but what am I going to do? We're only involved with mental illness. And 3 people said, you have to talk to Narsad. Called Narsad in New York, and I ended up talking to Connie Lieber, who actually is on the video we're about to see. And they didn't tell me how many minutes I had to speak, which is fortunate because you can just sit back and relax. I'll take the rest of the afternoon. I can tell you much more interesting thing than these doctors can. As far as the employment, you should be really excited to know the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has 32 clubhouses. We do some funding in some of the clubhouses per se, but also the coalition. And this year, the 2009 wage prices, the members of the 32 clubhouses in Massachusetts made over $13 million in wages. So people with mental illness can work, will work, and want to work. So we're very excited about that aspect. But back to thank you. Back to the research end. So Connie and I talked for about 2.5 hours. And it was fortunate because I called her and she wasn't home. And I left a message, so she called me. It was her bill. And so we talked for 2.5 hours, and she explained to me how Narsad worked, what it did, how it worked. And for those of you who don't know, since 1987, Narsad has granted $287 million in research grants. And Narsad also has the ability to tell you that every dollar you give to Narsad goes to research, because there are 2 family foundations that pay all of their expenses, etc. So we started working with Narsad from the Bear Foundation, and we started choosing our doctors. Anybody who wants to talk about it, I'd love to later, whenever you have a chance. You can become a research partner at Narsad, which means you can have your own doctor. You can look at who's being granted a particular research program, and that might be something that resonates with you. I was looking for schizophrenia, depression. I was looking for genetics. My colleagues in St. Louis that are the co-trustees with me at the Bear Foundation said to me at one point, when I thought DISC-1 was really interesting as a gene that was involved with schizophrenia, and there was some new work being done and we should fund it, and they looked at me and said, you only like it because you're a genealogist, missing the point of the fact that Johns Hopkins was getting on the bandwagon on DISC-1, which is a major gene that they've identified. In any event, we were doing about a third of our grants into research. And we had an amazing experience personally of dealing with the doctors and the people who've won the prizes. I mean, people like Dr. Rothschild here, who got a Young Investigator Award before I was born, and which is really pretty exciting. Actually, it wasn't, but the other aspect is Narsad gives a series of prizes, and the biggest prize they give is the Lieber Prize, which was created by the Lieber family, who is the person who gets that is the person who's done the most lifetime work in schizophrenia. And every year that's given at a gala in October, and the Liebers fund it. And we were trying to figure out how we could do something to honor Sidney Bear, so we created the Bear Prize. So the person who wins the Lieber Prize chooses somebody who is a younger investigator that is just starting out that would get the Bear Prize. So every year I have a new pigeon that I can take on for life because they're all mine. And they send me their reports, they send me their papers. There are several Narsad grantees in the audience, in fact. I won't embarrass them by asking them to tell us about their work because it's phenomenal work. But in any event, Narsad has made a major part of my life as a trustee of the Bear Foundation, so it's very difficult for me to talk about one without talking about the other. And then in July of 2008, I went on the board of Narsad, so now I can just basically say that Narsad's really fabulous. Also, for those of you who didn't see it, there's a little piece in your program. The board of directors have basically said they will match dollar for dollar any gift that's made on Healthy Minds Across America up to $2 million, or $100,000 if you wanted to make a $100,000 gift. They would match that, but then dollar for dollar up to $2 million entirely. So we would be thrilled. We're delighted. This is a free symposium. I'm thrilled that you're here. This is the only one we're doing in Massachusetts this year. We're doing 44 of these across the country. Narsad is just, it's unique, it's phenomenal, it's fascinating. And I'm here to say that we're incredibly pleased that you came here and welcome, et cetera, et cetera. I think the three speeches we're going to have are really extraordinary. And I'm also supposed to introduce the video that's coming up, which has some very poignant points from some family members, but from some doctors and from some of the work that Narsad is doing. And I just welcome you to be here and enjoy. And if you have any questions, just holler. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want people to remember Chrissy as such a great person who had an illness that is a terminal illness. Chrissy had bipolar disorder. People don't understand it. The mentally ill are shunned, and the people that have a mental illness have to live two different lives. With the public, they show that they are okay. And it's the families and people that are closest to them that know how much they suffer. Chrissy died by suicide. We've got to find a cure. That's my quest. And that's where I'm going to be working with Narsad till the day I die.
1 in 5 Americans suffer from mental illness. Narsad's mission is to bring hope for recovery, hope for a cure. We invested in cutting-edge research leading to extraordinary breakthroughs.
My daughter had been diagnosed with schizophrenia in the late 1970s. She would say the medications that she took were almost worse than the disease. So we wanted to know what caused the illness and what could be done to help her. We feel that's the only way we can help her if we supported research. A parent wants to help a child, and I thought the only way for me to help my child was really through finding out more information.
Narsad has been one of the most powerful forces in really advancing the field of mental illness research and expanding our knowledge base in this area.
The Narsad Scientific Council, in as much as it represents the best scientific leadership in psychiatric research, puts its approval on projects that are carefully screened, and therefore we're trying to get the research that will do the most or has the greatest promise.
Narsad has been there to support me, to allow me to do things with flexibility that other funding sources wouldn't allow. I'm a neurologist and I study depression as a neurological disease. The goal of our research is that we will characterize brain circuits to really be able to treat depression like we treat heart disease.
The purpose of research is to change the lives of sick people. So those are the things that stand there as the guiding beacon for why one does this.
Why does this happen to people? And then when it does happen, what kind of early interventions can we do to stop things from progressing, to stop people from having to suffer for years and years and years like I suffered? The illness I have, it's called schizoaffective disorder. The first symptom that I had was the voices who were talking to me. I remember times when I would hear them in the classroom and I would run out of the hall and I'd hide somewhere and just close my eyes as tight as I could and curl myself up into a ball, and they would just scream and scream and scream. We're gonna kill you, we're gonna kill you, we hate you, we're gonna kill you, you should die.
The main focus of my program is to try to translate how genes relate to risk for mental illness, particularly schizophrenia and depression. Genes represent the first absolutely objective insights to the mechanisms and causes of mental illness.
It makes me feel hopeful. The research that's being done by Narsad, it makes me feel hopeful.
This has been an extraordinary period for biomedical research. From my perspective, at a kind of tipping point, the tools and the opportunities we have now in terms of where the research is giving us greater hope than we've ever had in the past. Recovery is a word we use now all the time.
This is not like just a little case of the blues that a person has. People are dying from mental illness.
We believe strongly that science or research is really the purveyor of hope.
We all have a path, and my path is to work with Narsad to find a cure.
Narsad is so proud to offer this opportunity, Healthy Minds Across America. We're partnering with institutions, very prestigious institutions across the country, to bring science to families. And most often, we're bringing those scientists that we fund through your generosity and the generosity of others. Thank you so much for being here.
Before we begin the presentations, a couple more quick opening comments. But I do want to say it's a very powerful video and does reflect how the importance of continuing to support this research. We've been fortunate in the department, whether it was Betty Brudnick with our large building, basic science building, and supporting Tony Rothschild's work, whether it was Helen Koskanos, who's here with us today, who's been supportive of our research and some of the early, the pioneering genetics research that Shahram Akbarian and others are doing. We're very grateful to your support, Helen, and others, Cheryl Banks, who has supported some of our ongoing career mentoring activities. So again, we're very thankful, and I don't want to exclude any name, but seeing Helen there reminded me of the importance of the contributions that have come here. I'd like to introduce Mary Ellen Fody. She is a tireless worker and a champion for the mentally ill here in the state. She also represents to us the Department of Mental Health, where she's the Deputy Commissioner. She's also a Clinical and Professional Services and State Medical Director. She's a faculty member with an illustrious career involved in grants and paper writing herself and research. Has been voted the most outstanding psychiatrist award and many other awards that are too long to talk about today, but we just want to thank you, Mary Ellen, for coming.
Really lovely introduction. It's really an honor for me to be here today to speak for the department. Like Narsad, the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health is a true believer in what research has to offer us. In fact, Narsad and DMH have a lot of long-term friendships with similar organizations, such as NAMI, the National Alliance of Mentally Ill, NAMH, and the National Depression and Manic Depression Association. We share the belief that serious and persistent mental illnesses can be reliably identified at the premorbid or even earlier stage, can be assessed using valid and reliable tools, and can be treated using nationally accepted standards. That's the first place that we need to go. We know that cure is someday within reach. Today, neuropsychiatric illnesses such as those I just mentioned are the leading cause of disability, the loss of learning, of earnings, and loss of life. In particular, as Doug mentioned earlier, in the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health, our clients die on average 25 years younger than the general population in the state. That's an extraordinary statement. And the reasons for that are multifactorial and extremely complex, but they point to the urgent need for ongoing neuropsychiatric research, research that's collaborative, that's interdisciplinary, and that speaks to all of our citizens as well as all of our researchers. DMH has an obligation to conduct research into the causes of and the services for serious mental illness. We manage this responsibility by funding 2 centers for excellence. One here at UMass, the Department of Psychiatry, called the Center for Mental Health Services Research, and one at the BI Deaconess Department of Psychiatry called the Commonwealth Research Center. Those centers are both extraordinary. The return on investment that we've seen in the last few years has been $7 to $8 for every single dollar that the department gives them in seed money to grow. We're extremely proud of our centers, particularly our center here, and we're extremely proud of the work that they do. And in addition, what they offer us, what they offer me, is an opportunity to collaborate in an academic public sector partnership. Recently, the Department of Mental Health has tried to learn more about what its research agenda should be. We've done that through interviews, through workshops, and through focus groups with all kinds of constituents. We've learned that people with psychiatric disabilities care most about research that's relevant to improving their everyday lives. More specifically, they strongly endorse research in the areas of employment, in housing, in communication with providers, in access, in health and well-being, and in the end of stigma. Parents, on the other hand, are interested in research regarding safety, supports, system integration, diagnostic confusion, access, and elimination of stigma. Providers want help through research to do better in the kinds of work and services that they offer their clients. They want the research that's relevant to the services that they provide. As Doug mentioned earlier, the center here has developed a network called the MAHARN, the Mental Health Agency Research Network. And that agency research network actually helps our practitioners and our providers to find the relevant kind of research that they need to improve their policies, practices, and interventions. But clearly, there's no shortage of neuropsychiatric questions for researchers to answer. Over the last 6 years as the department's state medical director, I've seen an unprecedented change in a number of areas, some of which I'd prefer not to mention today because they're painful in terms of changes that we've had to make as a result of a reduction in our budget. But an important change that we've seen is a change in value. It's the incorporation in each and every one of us of a belief in recovery, in resiliency, and in partnership. Like Narsad, I believe we can achieve the vision of cure through science and research. And as Edward Kennedy said, the work goes on, the cause endures, the hope still lives, and the dream shall never die. And just lastly, I would like to remind us all of a wonderful woman who died on March 30th. Her name was Harriet Shelter. Harriet Shelter was one of the founders of the Alliance for the Mentally Ill. That's what she called it, AMI, like friend. And she died at 92 years of age, having had the first gathering of AMI with the expectation in 1979 that maybe 50 people would show up, but instead 250 people showed up. And now we've seen what's her legacy. Thank you very much.
Mary Ellen mentioned parents and their importance in advocacy, in working with researchers and clinicians and educators, really keeping us all grounded. And it's really an honor to introduce Lisa Lambert, who's the Executive Director for PAL, Parent Professional Advocacy League. They have some materials outside that you can see on the booth. She had also, I could say many things, but she said, keep it short and just tell them I'm a parent, because that's what matters. So,
for those of you who don't know me, let me just very quickly tell you that I am a parent, that my own son, who's now in his 20s, had serious mental health symptoms. We didn't know what it was. When he was 6, ended up in a state hospital for children by the time he was 8. We were living in California at the time. I was plunged into the system, very confusing, challenging system, and you sink or swim. You learn to navigate the system or not. And then I started looking around and saying, can't just be me, there must be other parents who are going through this as well. Found a group there. When I moved back to Massachusetts, which is where I'm from, began doing support groups, then began doing systems advocacy, because if you change for one family, the next family has the same struggles, and eventually became part of PAL, and I'm now the director. We do a lot of work, including advocacy at the State House, media work, to try to get the picture out there that there are children who suffer from an awful lot of psychiatric symptoms, illnesses. Some parents use different words for it, and it's not just about the children, it's about the whole family, because children live in families, and families live in communities. So I'm very honored to say that I have the privilege of being the director of PAL, which is a statewide organization, a family-run organization of about 4,000 families, and our children come and our families come from every community in the Commonwealth with diverse cultures, economic backgrounds, and different beliefs. But they're united in their concern and often advocate for their children in order to make the systems better for their entire family as well as themselves. We'll hear from a lot of people today who are experts in their field, but I want to remind you all that families are experts too. They're experts about their children, and they're experts about their families. They often learn to be experts about their children's disorder, their educational plan, and the types of treatments, and they're constantly trying to increase their expertise. And that's why research is important to families. Most families are in the midst of trying to access treatment, let alone effective treatment, and they probably wouldn't say research is really important while they're in the midst of the struggle, like I was when my child was very small. But it is important to them, and it is important to us. We're not so far away from the days when children were diagnosed with things that describe their behavior, like oppositional defiant, or by terms such as minimal brain dysfunction. Research has created a better understanding that children and teens do experience excuse me, mental health episodes, and their illnesses look different than they do in adults. It's helped shift society away from thinking that if a child has a mental health disorder, the parent must have created it, although there's still too much of that kind of thinking out there. So what I want to do today is very quickly talk about the top 5 list, a la David Letterman's top 10 list I want to tell you my list anyway. And the list I'm going to call the top 5 ways that research lets families just say no. Number 5, research lets families say no to ineffective treatment, even if it's the kind of treatment that insurance companies will pay for. Research can give families the information to hone in on treatments that will be effective for their children, themselves, and their families. Families know what kind of treatments work for their children with specific needs. Number 4, research lets families say no to treatments that waste their time and money. Research proves the effectiveness of interventions that can give families faith that time, effort, money that goes into the treatment is worth it. One mother said recently, "I want to see the data to help me and give me the strength when it's time to disrupt dinner and force my child to get in the car and see the therapist. Give me the data so I have the strength to argue for this because some days I'm so tired." Number 3, research lets families say no to policies that don't work. Research results can be used by families and family organizations like PAL to advocate for changes in practice and policy that benefit them. Number 2, research lets families say no to treatments that are not culturally appropriate. Good data helps families understand whether treatment works for children and families from their culture and if their experience is shared by others who share their ethnicity or speak their language. And number 1, research lets families say no way when the system doesn't hold itself accountable. Data is a way to compare a system to itself over time and to evaluate multiple interventions to understand what really is effective. Families want accountability. We pay high insurance premiums to ensure we receive effective treatment, and we all pay taxes, which in turn can pay for services. Data can help us determine ways to improve services and treatments that we offer our children and our families. I want to end by thanking all the researchers here and everywhere who help our families just say no. Without you, we would be nowhere. Thank you.
Last quick introduction I'm going to do is for David Smelson, who's representing the Veterans Affairs. He is coming from the integrated network, which includes all the states around us. David's been a pioneer in research also with the seriously mentally ill, those who also have addiction problems. He's helped our medical school be the only medical school in Massachusetts that has formal academic partnerships with all 3 VA centers, Bedford, Boston, and Northampton. So thank you so much, David, for coming.
All right, so thank you. So Doug stole my thunder, actually. I want to, on behalf of the Department of Veterans Affairs, I wanted to thank UMass, actually, for putting on a great event, and thank everybody for coming. As Doug mentioned, there are a bunch of people overseas fighting every day for us while we're here, so we appreciate that. I should also say that I want to thank UMass for being a fantastic partner with us. I've been here for 3 years, and we have now a new Center for Homeless Veterans. There are 132,000 homeless veterans on the street every night, and our center is going to help end that homelessness. So again, thank you very much for all of your support.